You are listening to Small Business Straight Talk with your host, Amber De La Garza. Amber is a sought-after coach, trainer, speaker, and writer who gives small business owners the straight talk on productivity, time management, business systems, leading your teams, strategic decision-making, and mindset. No BS, fluff, or overused jargon. Just actionable strategies to get results and succeed in business. And here is your host, Amber De La Garza, the productivity specialist.
Welcome, and thank you for listening to the Small Business Straight Talk podcast. Today's episode 415, Strategic Thinking, What's Getting in Your Way and How to Fix It. If you're a small business owner who wants to learn effective business strategies, improve time management, and elevate productivity to maximize profits, reduce stress, and make time for what matters most, then you're in the right place, and I'm so glad you've joined me. Do you ever feel like you're so buried in the day-to-day that you never get a chance to zoom out and think about where your business is actually going? Stick around because in today's episode, I'm breaking down what's really getting in the way of strategic thinking, and it's probably not what you think. I'll share the science behind why your brain resists it, how to set yourself up for success, and exactly what to do during thinking time so it actually moves your business forward. Before we dive in, I want to personally invite you to take my next level business owner quiz. Head on over to amberdelagarza.com/quiz. Take 3 short minutes to find out what's most holding your business back from taking it to the next level. Then you'll get a curated playlist of specific episodes that have strategies and actionables you can implement in your business immediately. So hit pause and head on over to amberdelagarza.com/quiz. And now let's get to the straight talk. Can I ask you something? When's the last time you sat down with no agenda, no tasks, no fires to put out, and just thought about your business? Not working in your business, thinking about it strategically. Chances are that time doesn't exist. It's not even on your calendar. It's not a priority, and if you're being honest, it might not even feel like real work. Or perhaps you have tried to block thinking time out, only to spend it checking emails, knocking out small tasks, or staring at the wall or your computer screen, wondering what you're even supposed to be thinking about. Either way, you're not alone. Most business owners know that they need to work on their business, not just in it. I know you've probably heard that advice 1,000 times, but actually doing it, that's where things fall apart. Here's what I want you to know. There are several reasons why strategic thinking feels so hard and why it never happens at all. And once you understand what's getting in your way, you can actually fix it. And that's exactly what we're covering today. I'm going to walk you through 4 things. First, we'll talk about the permission problem, why thinking time feels like slacking, and how to shift that mindset. Then, I'll explain why your brain resists strategic thinking. And stick around because you're going to find out it's not a discipline issue. Next, I'll share how to set yourself up for success before you even start thinking. And finally, I'll get specific about what to actually do during your thinking time, where to be, what to focus on, and how to make sure your insights don't disappear. So let's start with the first barrier most business owners face. Let me start with a question. When you sit down to just think, do you feel like you're actually working? Or does it feel like you're slacking off? If you're being honest, thinking time feels sometimes a bit unproductive. There's no email sent, no client served, no task checked off, nothing to show for it. So what happens? You fill the time with something that feels more like real work. I would argue busy work, and certainly oftentimes not your most productive work. You're going to check your emails, you'll knock out a quick task, and your thinking time disappears. Here's what I want you to understand. Thinking is the work. In fact, it's highly, highly productive activity. As we define productivity here as investing your best time into your best activities. And you're going to find out that as the business owner, as the CEO, this is certainly the best activities that are going to help move your business forward. This thinking time that I'm talking about is not time to prepare for the work. It's not a reward you earn after everything else is done. Strategic thinking, problem solving, planning for the future, that is the work of leading your business. Think about it this way. If you hired a CEO, would you expect them to spend all day answering emails and putting out fires? No, of course not. You'd expect them to think, to strategize, to zoom out and see the big picture. You'd expect them to block time on their calendar for high-level planning, and you certainly wouldn't expect them to feel guilty about it. But what are you doing as the CEO of your business? Are you giving yourself that same expectation? Or are you buried in the day-to-day telling yourself you'll get to the strategic stuff when things slow down? You are the CEO, and that means thinking time is part of your job, not a luxury that you have to earn. Research backs this up. The Strategic Thinking Institute found that 97% of leaders said strategic thinking was the most important behavior for success. 97%. But those same leaders said they couldn't find the time to do it because they were too busy with day-to-day operations. They knew it mattered. They just couldn't give themselves permission to prioritize it. So I want you to hear this. You do not need to earn thinking time. You don't need to justify it. Scheduled thinking time isn't a nice to have or when you can get around to it. You shouldn't be sacrificing it when things get busy. But here's the thing. Giving yourself permission is only the first step. Because even when you block the time, even when you sit down ready to think, something happens. Or more accurately, nothing happens. Your brain goes blank. You stare at the walls or you stare at your computer screen, and suddenly checking email feels a little more appealing. And that might not be a discipline problem. That is your brain. And understanding why it does that is what we need to talk about next. Imagine. Or better yet, you probably don't need to imagine because this might be exactly what happened last time you thought to yourself, it's time to do some strategic thinking. You blocked out the time, you're ready to think strategically about your business, and nothing. Your mind goes blank. Or worse, it races through your to-do list, your inbox, the client issues you haven't resolved yet, everything except the strategic thinking you scheduled time to do. So the question is, what's going on? Before you chalk this up to a discipline problem, let me share some real reasons why your brain resists strategic thinking. Here's what the research shows. A meta-analysis published in the Neuroscience and Behavioral Reviews found that stress has a measurable negative impact on creativity. But it's not just that stress makes thinking harder. It actually changes the type of thinking your brain can do. Under stress, your brain shifts into what researchers call convergent thinking. That's when your brain focuses on finding the answer. Not just the answer, but the answer quickly. It's survival mode. Great for escaping danger, terrible for strategic planning. Strategic thinking requires the opposite, divergent thinking. That's where you explore possibilities, make unexpected connections, zoom out and see the big picture. But when your prefrontal cortex is busy managing stress, those resources aren't available. Your brain is too occupied scanning for threats to do creative, expansive work that you're asking it to do. So when you start your thinking time after a stressful morning and expect strategic brilliance, your brain physically can't deliver it. Not because you're not smart enough or because you're not disciplined enough. No, it's because you're asking it to do something it's not equipped to do in that state. And here's what makes this so frustrating. You're stressed because things in your business need to change. Maybe you're drowning in tasks that should have been delegated. Maybe you're dealing with the same problems over and over. Maybe you're working harder than ever, but not seeing the results you want. You know you need to zoom out and think strategically to fix these things. That's the only way forward. But you can't think strategically because you're so stressed. And you're too stressed because you haven't had the time to think strategically to solve the root problems. And thus, it's a vicious cycle. You need to think to reduce stress, but you need to reduce stress to think. If that's where you are right now, you are not alone. And while there may be things within your control, there's also real brain science working against you. The good news? There is a way to break this cycle, but it starts with understanding what else might be getting in the way. Your physical state affects your mental state. Your body affects your brain more than you might realize. After just 1 to 2 weeks of getting only 5 hours of sleep per night, research shows you're as cognitively impaired as if you were legally drunk. Imagine trying to work, much less strategically plan, while being drunk. Now, in this research, the areas that are most affected: innovation, revising plans, dealing with the unexpected. These are exactly what you need to think strategically. Sleep is a big deal. And if you are just generally trying to show up your best in your business, generally trying to be your most productive self, and think strategically, sleep is essential for your performance. But that's not it, because there's also hormones. And I'm not just talking about menopause, though that definitely matters. I'm talking about chronic elevated cortisol from ongoing stress that can actually damage your hippocampus, the part of your brain responsible for memory and learning. And then you have thyroid fluctuations that can affect focus. And those are just a few to name. When clients tell me that they have a hard time focusing, they have brain fog, they can't think clearly, I often ask them about their health. How are they sleeping? When was the last time they had blood work done? Do they know if their hormones are in alignment? These are real physical health challenges that will affect your ability to perform at a high level. And so I share this to say that sometimes the barrier to strategic thinking isn't a business problem. It's not if you're smart enough. It's not if you're disciplined enough. It honestly could be a physical body problem. Next, the factors that stack against you. Beyond stress and physical state, other factors pile on. Things like mental clutter. When you have dozens of unfinished tasks or projects swirling around in your head, your brain can't settle. It's using all of its processing power just to keep track of what's open. How about your environment? If you're sitting at the same desk where you're answering emails and handle client issues, your brain associates that space with doing, not thinking. Every notification, even ones that you don't check, can in the background pull your attention back towards execution and away from zooming out and strategic thinking. Emotional weight, that unresolved conflict, that anxiety about a client situation, a team member, maybe it was an argument with your significant other, challenges getting your kids out of the house, and you have this emotional weight and you're stressed. These can consume cognitive bandwidth, whether you want them to or not. And lastly, I wanted to touch on timing. Are you scheduling thinking time during an afternoon slump? Are you actually setting yourself up for failure because you're fighting your own biology? Timing matters. Timing in the day, timing in the week. Being strategic about when you plan to do your strategic thinking time is actually critical to your success. Now, one of these, of course, perhaps you could power through. But when they stack, stress, tired, cluttered desk, afternoon slump, worried about a hard conversation, good luck thinking strategically. All of these things matter. I want to talk to you about another way in which it might be inhibiting you from strategically thinking, and that is that you are still in the doing mode. Here's the factor that I see trip up business owners more than any other. They try to think strategically without giving their brain time to transition. So imagine you finish a client call at 2 p.m., spend 10 minutes on email, then at 2:15, you try to think about the future of your business, and you wonder why nothing comes. I just told you timing matters. Timing matters for energetic and energy and ability to focus. But timing matters when you're trying to slip in strategic thinking as just another block of time sandwiched between doing. One of the hardest things we ask ourselves to do as business owners is to zoom into the execution and the day-to-day and to zoom out. And to ask ourselves to zoom out and think strategically sandwiched between the doing and the execution often feels impossible. And then you wonder when you set yourself up in this way, why nothing comes to you, why you don't feel creative, why you can't stay focused around what you plan to strategically think about. I'm going to share some research here. Research shows that it takes, on average, 23 minutes to fully refocus after an interruption. So when you go straight from doing to thinking, your brain is still processing everything from the last few hours. You're not thinking about the future, you're mentally finishing the past. Now, this stat here is something that I use all the time with distractions, with interruptions, with just generally being able to focus and do the work that is on our task list or to-do list. But the same research is helpful in understanding what it takes to transition from different types of thinking, because our brains have to realign to really refocus. So that's why thinking time squeezed between meetings almost never works. You sit down, your brain still is in reactive mode, you stare at the ceiling for 20 minutes, or if you make it to 20 minutes, most of us will self-distract by looking at what emails are in our inbox, what's on social media, or just want to go talk to somebody else in the office, because sitting for 20 minutes waiting to transition into strategic thinking time seems like torture. And so you give up and you go back to your task list because that feels more productive. You're going to get those quick dopamine hits of checking the things off the list. So, does that sound familiar? The problem isn't that you can't think strategically. The problem is you're trying to sprint without warming yourself up. Your brain has different modes. It has execution mode, which is fast, reactive, task focused, and you have strategic thinking mode, which is slow, expansive, possibility focused. And switching between them isn't instant, no matter how much you want it to be. In fact, how much I want it to be. I would love if our brains can do that. But this limitation shows up in so many ways of how we show up in our business. And I'm not going to get us off topic, but for this episode, this is really, really important to understand. Our brains operate in two different modes. And as often as we can separate the planning from the doing, it really helps us show up our best. So, if your thinking time feels unproductive, if you keep meaning to work on your business but end up working in it, it might be a discipline issue. And I'm not going to let you off the hook entirely, but it also might be stress, physical depletion, mental clutter, your environment, and zero transition time are all working against you. And no amount of discipline can overcome every barrier stacking against you at once. But we got good news, and that's why I'm doing this episode. Because once you understand what's getting in the way, you can start removing these barriers. And that's exactly what we're going to cover next. One of my favorite sayings is, our businesses just want us to show up our best. And so the more that we understand about what's happening in our bodies, and around us, with our environments, that is not allowing us to show up our best, our awareness will let us solve for those so that we can show up our best. Now that you understand why your brain resists strategic thinking, let's talk about what you can actually do about it. Because here's the thing. You can't just try harder and expect different results. If stress, mental clutter, and no transition time are working against you, willpower isn't the answer. You really have to set yourself up for success. Think about it this way. An athlete doesn't just walk straight from their car onto the field and expect peak performance. No, they're going to warm up, they're going to prepare. They're probably having some sort of ritual to transition themselves. They are purposely creating the conditions for success. And strategic thinking is no different. Your brain needs a runway to transition into strategic thinking. Remember that vicious cycle I mentioned? You're stressed because things need to change, but you can't think strategically because you're too stressed. Yeah, total catch-22. Well, here's how to break it. You start small and imperfect. You don't need a 2-hour block of Zen-like calm time to be thinking strategically. No, I want you to start where you're at. Perhaps you start with 30 minutes where you've done a few simple things to give your brain a fighting chance. The cycle breaks when you stop waiting for the perfect conditions and start creating good enough conditions, getting into movement, practicing, creating that muscle of strategic thinking. One small thinking session leads to the next one and the next one. And soon you will be able to do longer periods of time of strategic thinking. One short, small thinking session can lead to a small, but one insight. And that insight can lead to a small action. And that action can reduce a little stress. Even sometimes a simple, small strategy or insight can make a huge rippling effect in your business. So don't underestimate small but mighty strategic thinking time that can have a big impact to reduce that stress load. And suddenly, the cycle starts working for you instead of against you. You're not going to solve everything in your business the first time you have a thinking session, but you might make some progress, and that progress will break the cycle. Before we go any further, let me be really, really straight with you. If you're running on 5 hours of sleep, if you're dealing with brain fog that will not lift, if your body is depleted, this is not a discipline problem, it's a body problem. No amount of planning or habit building will overcome chronic exhaustion or hormonal imbalances. If that's where you are, thinking time, thinking strategies will only get you that far. If that's where you are, thinking time strategies will only get you so far. So if you've been struggling and nothing seems to work, ask yourself, how am I sleeping? What are your sleeping habits? Perhaps your first thinking and strategy session is just focusing on getting better sleep. When was the last time you had blood work done? Are you sure you have all the nutrients that you need, that your health is in order? These are really real fundamental questions that I want you to just journey down if you really feel as though brain fog, hormones, sleeping are getting in the way of you truly being able to focus. If there's something physical getting in the way, then that becomes top priority. And look, I'm not saying you need to have perfect health to think strategically by any means, but I have done a deep dive in my own personal life around this. One, I'm of a certain age and my hormones are changing, and I went through a huge hormonal shift because of personal health issues long before I got into menopause, which turned me on to this whole connection between hormones or imbalance of my hormones and my mental capacity and brain fog. Also, for those of you that have listened for some length of time, I think I've shared that my son had gotten really, really sick with a bacteria that entered through his skin in wrestling last year. It's been 1 year from right now when I'm recording this. And one of the symptoms that stopped me in my tracks was my 15-year-old son saying that he felt like he couldn't come up with words and he was having brain fog and he wasn't able to concentrate at school. And this was a sudden shift in symptoms that he had never experienced before. And that was one of my nonstop negotiables, that is not okay, that kept making me seek additional answers. And so this is a very real thing. Dehydration can affect it. The time of day that you're eating, the meals that you're eating can all impact our ability to do this deep thinking work. Next, I want you to think about clearing the clutter, because remember those open loops we talked about? The dozens of unfinished tasks swirling around in your head. Those open loops and tasks swirling around in your head, they will sabotage your thinking time if you don't deal with them first. So here's a real quick way to calm the noise, and that's to sit down. Before you sit down to think strategically, I want you to do a brain dump. Take 5 to 10 minutes and write everything down that's on your mind. Every task, every worry, every don't forget to. Get it out of your head and onto paper or in your trusted system if you have a trusted task project management system. And don't just dump the tasks, dump the emotions that are weighing to it. Understand that you're just putting that on pause for 30 minutes or for 1 hour, but that you've gotten it out of your head and you can go reference it again. I want you to write down the conversations you've been avoiding, the anxiety about a client situation, the guilt about something you dropped the ball on. Write it all down. You're going to use sort of like a journaling to calm your brain from going all over the place. And the point is not to solve all these things right now. You're just telling your brain that it doesn't have to hold on to them. And this will help free up that mental bandwidth that you need for strategic thinking. Now, if you are already doing the daily wrap, which is the daily review and action plan that I walked you through in episode 350, diving into my daily wrap, this framework is so powerful on many, many levels. I share a lot of that in that episode. But one of the primary benefits is you're not going to have to do this brain dump before you do strategic thinking because you're doing this every single day for 10 to 15 minutes, wrapping up your day, making sure nothing's falling through the cracks, making a plan for tomorrow, updating your master task list. This 10 to 15 minute habit of planning for tomorrow will help, and doing it consistently as well is generally going to help you with that like noise, clutter, conversations, chatter going on in your head. And we're talking about that through the lens of strategic thinking. But think about how helpful that would be if you can calm that noise for decision making, calm that noise for doing any other tasks or projects that you need to focus on. So if you haven't already done so, be sure you go ahead and listen to, put it on your playlist, episode 350. So the next thing I want to cover with you to set yourself up for success for strategic thinking time is kind of going to be like kill two birds with one stone. One is chances are you're squeezing out strategic thinking time, right? And so if the day doesn't go as planned, if something runs late, you don't feel like it, your energy is depleted, we're going to squeeze out the strategic planning time. And it's kind of just natural, and we need to understand that, is that the strategic thinking time is always competing against things that have very hard deadlines or external accountability, in the sense that there's a task to do for a client. There's a task to review something to keep your team not bottlenecked. And those external accountabilities can often take priority over something that is definitely, we've covered, is essential and really important, but really only you are going to know if it got done or didn't get done. So there's two things I want you to think about when you're scheduling time to do strategic thinking. First, schedule the time. I'm not using that word by accident. I want you to block out specific time on your calendar, make it an appointment, and answer the question, what are you specifically doing? When are you doing it for? And how long are you doing it? Those three questions are answered every time you ever make an appointment on your calendar. The caveat is this appointment is with yourself and other appointments are with other people. But I don't want you to just block out any time on your calendar. I want you to be really, pun intended, strategic, thoughtful about what time of day you are putting this time on your calendar. I, for one, could never put strategic thinking time mid-afternoon for myself. Now, I can show up for a client and I can coach them. I could be on my A game. I could strategize for them in their business because I'm not emotionally tied to it. I can be on my A game at 2:00 in the afternoon. But if I'm sitting in my office by myself and only accountable to myself, that's not an ideal time. I've expended a lot of energy throughout the day. I'm not at my top A game when I need to do things for myself. Well, I can either judge that or I can observe it and say, great, I tend to not have as much willpower in the afternoon. So how do I counteract that and set myself up for success? And the way I'm going to do that is to ensure that it's prioritized at my high energy level, which for me is going to be in the morning. You may be like, absolutely no way, Amber. Like, I need 3 cups of coffee and I need a runway, and my best time is after lunch. My best time is in the afternoon, late afternoon after the team leaves. I don't care what that best time is. I want you to experiment with it and find what that best time is. And we're going to talk about a little bit more about like what you're doing and where you're at. And so that also might impact what the best time of the day is for you. Just really understand that you can either be setting yourself up for failure or you could be setting yourself up for success depending on when you're scheduling this time. Next, remember when I shared with you that 23-minute statistic about how long it takes to fully refocus after an interruption? Imagine that you're ending a client call at 9:30 and you expect to be in strategic thinking mode by 9:30, 9:35. It's not going to happen. Your brain is probably still processing the call. You're still in doing mode. That's just one example. And I think that you do need a runway, a buffer between execution and thinking. So here's what that could look like. Before your thinking time, give yourself 15 to 20 minutes of low demand activities. Go for a walk, do something really simple, maybe do a little, I call it a power hour, but it wouldn't be an hour. Like give yourself 10 or 15 minutes to power through some of those small pesky tasks that when you mark them off, you get that little dopamine hit. You're in momentum, but not major brain power tasks. Even filling it in with just routine, mundane tasks where you're kind of on autopilot could help create this buffer time. But I also think just stepping away from your desk, getting fresh air, letting your brain wind down, go get a cup of coffee, separate yourself from the doing to the thinking. This is not wasted time. This is your transition time. And you can even give yourself clues like, I'm going to light this candle when I'm strategic thinking. I'm going to put this oil on my inside of my wrists when I want to do strategic thinking. Really, you can come up with anything that is giving you time to transition and giving your nervous system a chance to down-regulate. You're letting those stress hormones settle. So if you just came into the office and you were stuck in traffic and you were getting the kids out of the house, that's probably not the best time to be like, and I'm switching on to strategic thinking. You're creating the conditions for your brain to shift into expansive strategic mode. And if you skip this step, you'll sit down for thinking time and wonder why nothing comes. Well, your brain is not broken. It just wasn't ready. You didn't clue it in that it had time to refocus and shift gears. So I want to remind you that if you haven't been doing strategic thinking consistently, I do not want you to start with 2-hour thinking sessions. You are literally going to set yourself up to fail. Not only because that you don't have 2 hours in your week to do strategic thinking, because that might be the first barrier or hurdle, but rather because you haven't trained yourself to give that focused thinking time. So I want you to start with 30 minutes once a week. And once that becomes natural, then you can expand it. And I don't want you to judge yourself. Chances are you're going to get to a point where if you try to do 45 minutes or an hour, or even at the 30-minute mark, I want you to observe like, oh, okay, 20 minutes in, I'm self-distracting. 20 minutes in, I'm no longer really able to focus and I'm reaching for my phone. I'm jumping into my inbox. I'm looking for someone to pass by my desk so I can talk to them. When we do self-distraction that way, it's a clue that you've probably hit your limit. And I would rather, instead of it just happening by default, that if it's happening, you can observe that behavior and just get curious about, have you hit that limit? Or is it because of the time of day? Or did you not have a container in which we're going to talk about next, of like what specifically to think about? And so you're not really able to focus your mind past a certain time frame. This all is to set yourself up for success so that you can break that catch-22 cycle by starting imperfect, but acknowledging what could be impacting it feeling harder than it needs to. That you're going to acknowledge any body, mind, physical things. You're going to clear the mental clutter, the emotional clutter. You're not only going to schedule it, you're going to schedule it when you have energy, and you're going to give yourself that runway transition time and start small. But I do want to cover next, what are we actually thinking about when we're in thinking mode? Like, what do you actually do? Where should you be? And what should you be thinking about? And I realized that this was a challenge when I've been working with clients and they're like, yes, like I know I need to do strategic thinking, but like, what does that look like? Do I have an agenda? Do I, create a list? Like, I just to sit down and tell your brain to do strategic thinking, it's too wide, it's too vast, and you're not going to get the results that you're looking for. So the first thing I want to cover is, where are you at when you're doing strategic thinking? I think the default might be, I should be at my desk. And I'm going to tell you that that's probably the absolute worst place to do strategic thinking. Your brain already associates your desk with execution, doing mode, checking things off the list. Think about it. Your desk is where you answer emails, you handle client issues, you put out fires. Your brain has literally learned that when you're at your desk, it's time to do. Every notification, every sticky note, every tab open on your browser, every pile of paper is pulling your attention back to execution mode. Strategic thinking requires a different mode entirely. So change your environment. I think the easiest way to do this is to get up and walk. And you get bonus points if you can get up, walk, move your body, and you're out in nature. A Stanford study found that walking increased creative output by an average of 60%. 60%. And here's what's fascinating. It didn't matter whether people walked outside in nature or on a treadmill facing a blank wall. I'm giving bonus points for fresh air. I'm giving bonus points for stepping out of the work area. But the Stanford study says it actually makes no difference. So choose your environment. The act of walking itself boosted creative thinking. So why? Walking is rhythmic and automatic. It doesn't require conscious effort. That frees up your brain to wander, make connections, and think expansively. But here's another reason why walking works. Remember how stress shifts your brain into convergent thinking, focused on finding the answer fast? Walking reverses that. The movement reduces cortisol and helps your nervous system settle. You're not just changing your location, you're changing your brain state. So if you're stuck on a problem or need to think through something strategic, don't sit there grinding it out. Get up and walk. Even a 15, 20-minute walk can literally shift and change everything. I would also include in here is that we don't need to do strategic thinking just during business hours. If you are working out, say at the gym, and you have your routine that you do on Tuesdays and you have your routine that you do on a Thursday, and you're just running through it really automated, you can set an intention for that workout to think about something specifically or to solve a specific challenge, and do that while you're moving your body. The next thing I want to talk about is this idea of, well, have you ever noticed that your best ideas come in the shower or on a long drive or while you're folding laundry? That is not random. That is real science. There's real science behind it, and I'm going to share that with you. When you stop consciously working on a problem, your brain doesn't stop processing it. It shifts into what researchers call the default mode network. This is where your unconscious mind makes connections you couldn't see while you were actively focused. It's why you can struggle with something for hours, walk away, and suddenly have the answer while doing something completely unrelated. But here's the key. You have to load the problem first. If you want your shower to be productive, strategic thinking time, spend a few minutes before the shower focusing on the question that you're trying to answer. Maybe read through your notes, remind your brain what you're working on. Then let the warm water and the routine activity do its work. This, again, same with exercise, like I mentioned earlier, same with driving. These low demand activities are perfect for incubation, but only if you're giving your brain something to incubate. I have a lot of personal examples of this. So my son, I'm in the car for 2 hours a day. We're on countdown. He's got his driver's permit. But for years, I've been in the car 2 hours a day, taking him to and from school. And at least half of that, I'm in the car by myself. And so I'm really intentional. If there is something that is occupying my mind, something that needs to be solved, I need to get strategic about it. I'll set the intention for the car ride to just let my mind wander. And for me, that seems like a very productive use of that drive time, that I'm away from my desk, I'm doing something, I've driven this route way too many times to count, and I can really just let my mind solve for that. I didn't find any research on this next example, but I'm going to tell you that it has worked for me. And I almost feel like I shouldn't share it because I'm telling you how important sleep is. But I have repeatedly throughout my life had something that I knew I wanted to solve, and I just couldn't get the answer. I couldn't come at it in a certain way. I couldn't get to the solution that I thought I needed. And so I will, while I'm relaxing and falling asleep, I'll work through, remind myself what I'm working on, and I will set an intention that when I wake up, I will have a breakthrough. I will have a solution. And I know that my brain is working on it throughout the night, and I want it to be the last thing that I'm thinking of. I will say, because sleep is so important, when you do this, it probably needs to be something that you're not really, really emotionally tied to, where you're stirring up a bunch of emotions before you go to bed. But if you're neutral about it and trust your own mind and your own body to come up with the solution, I have found that to happen time and time again. That might be a little woo-woo for you, but I did want to share that example because that's how I do some of my best thinking and breakthroughs, is not pressured, just trusting my own self that when I wake up, I will have worked through whatever I needed to work through. And we talked about this a little bit earlier, but I combine this with your walking. There was so much research on getting outside. There's something called attention restoration theory, and it shows that natural environments help your brain recover from the focused attention you use all day for tasks. So again, if you're looking for that transition period, if you go for that walk, maybe on that walk outside, you are doing that strategic thinking, but also you might just need to go for a walk to clear your head for the day. Green spaces, water, even looking out a window at a tree, these all have measurable cognitive benefits. Your brain relaxes in a way it can't when it's surrounded by screens and to-do lists. So if you have an option, take your thinking time outside. Again, this could be at a park, it could be around the block. My favorite is, when the weather's great, is my backyard. I will move to my backyard when the next thing on my list, on my calendar, is to do some sort of strategic thinking, when I do not need to be at my desk and I want to be creative. I might get a cup of coffee. I'm going to enjoy all of it. I'm going to make it a whole ritual. I'm probably going to wear short sleeves so I can get some sun. I'm going to work on my tan a little bit. I'm going to drink some coffee if it's in the morning. I'm really going to set this environment up that I get to enjoy it. And the other side of this is I'm going to have some sort of strategic breakthrough. You can also, as I said, you set an intention for walking, but you could go on a hike. You could choose to come into the office later because you're going to go do a hike, which plays double duty in getting in nature, moving your body, but you're really going to be solving something and wearing your CEO hat. There should be no guilt in that. There's no explanation needed to anyone, including your team. You know, I'm telling you what you need to show up your best to get this important work done. Get as creative as you want. Just promise me that you are not going to try and do this type of thinking at your desk in front of monitors and your keyboard. Now, next, I'm going to be switching into just sharing with you some ways that you can make the best use of this time. And the easiest thing to do is to ask one specific question or focus area. And this is really, really important because when we say, how do I increase revenue in the business? That is too broad. It's too vague. Even by just reframing that to say, how can I make X offer more profitable? Or you can say, what is one additional revenue stream that can contribute to my gross income? Well, then the first thing we're solving for is what are all the options for one additional revenue stream? Then the next session or further, you can get into the details. But if you understand what problem you're specifically solving and ask your brain one specific question, this is really key. I will say that questions are my superpower, and asking yourself the right question is everything. So in my coaching with my private coaching clients, I'm really like a strategic partner. And I'm going to ask questions in ways that they probably never thought of. And the question itself will often reframe the challenge in a way that they can come up with the solution immediately. And this is not magic. The question matters. We can pigeonhole ourselves into minimal or one solution based on a question. So asking the right questions to draw us out of a loop that we've had consistently on trying to solve the problem or any problem the same way is really important. Another framework that I have shared a couple times in episodes previously is my insight feedback loop framework. And this insight feedback loop framework is 3 specific questions that you are going to ask for anything specific. So the way that I run it is that we're going to ask it for, if we're doing business planning, we're going to ask these 3 questions for every area of our business. But you can also ask these very key questions around pricing, offerings. You can even put my schedule in the middle of it. So here's how this works. Question number 1, what is working? This is key. You're asking first what is working. This is getting your mind going. You're coming up with what is working in the positive. We want to know what is working because there's a lot of clues in what's already working to answer the next few questions. 2, just assume you're putting in this question in the center. I call it a loop. So think the question in the center is onboarding process. We all have some sort of onboarding process as service-based business owners. So if you just are working on that, we would ask, what is working? So what is working? And you can say, we have a great welcome email. You can say we've automated a payment system. Fill in the blank, what is working? The next question is, what's not working? Specifically around your onboarding process. And these are going to be the things that you have floated around, you've thought of, but maybe you haven't captured. They're going to be the things that if you give yourself some time to think about, you're going to be able to pull out. Then question number 3 is, what could work? And this is going to be the things you're going to start to do. Another reason why these 3 questions are really important to ask in this way is that we also often need to understand what's working. There are big wins in doubling down on what's working. So imagine we had the word marketing in the middle and we said what's working, what's not working, what could work. Well, what could work is to double down on a strategy that we already know is working. But also, if marketing's in the middle, maybe we only have so much time to invest or funds into marketing. Well, we need to first understand what's working. Great. How much time goes to that already? So for me, podcasting works. Before I ever add what could work, I need to understand my own capacity, my team's capacity, and I need to know that podcasting is not going away. Well, that helps me then answer what's not working and then what could work. So answering those 3 questions in that order and being very specific of what's inside the loop is going to focus your brain to generate solutions. Also, what we generally focus on as business owners is just the last 2 questions. What's not working? Great, long list. That makes me feel really excited about doing this strategic thinking, said nobody. Or we go straight for what could work and we just create this long list of ideas, but it's not framed in a way that we can actually take action on because we don't understand capacity and we don't understand where it fits into the overall strategy. So that's it. Like those are 2 great ways. Now I have one more way and I also have a freebie for you. So I think another approach is to do future focused thinking. Instead of looking at what's happening now, you project forward. Because if you know where you want to go in the business, say 1 year from now, then you can focus your questions and your strategic thinking time on how do you close the gap between where you clearly have thought about where you want to be and where you're at currently. And this is really, really valuable. I have a free resource. It's called A Look Ahead 1 Year From Now. And it's a worksheet that's going to ask you questions about your business, about your personal life, goals. And it asks it in 2 ways because like I said, the way you ask questions is really important to draw out the information. So if I asked you what it is that you want a year from now, you might be able to name a couple things. But if I asked very specific questions of like, what do you want your schedule to not look like? Right? So if I said, what do you want your schedule to look like on a weekly basis? You might come up with a few, but my guess is if I asked you, what do you want your schedule not to look like? You'd be like, I don't want to work after dinner. I don't want to work on weekends. I don't want to go in early. I would like to take a lunch break. Okay, we'll put that in the wants. But the don't wants are sometimes more on the surface level. And so if you can pull those out, then what's the opposite? And now you got clarity around where do you want to be in a year from now. So if you want to go grab that resource to go do your first 30-minute strategy session and future focused thinking, head on over to amberdelagarza.com/look ahead. You can download that and start right away. All right, before we wrap up, it's really important that we highlight the importance of capturing what you're thinking about. Because if you don't capture it and turn it into actionables, you're maybe wasting your time. So insights can be really slippery. You'll have a breakthrough on your walk, feel certain that you'll remember it, and by the time you're back at your desk, it's gone. I want you to have a capturing system, and this could be voice memos on your phone. It could be a small notebook in your pocket. It could be a notes app, whatever works for you. Have a trusted way and a consistent way. So I don't need 10 notebooks and I don't need things in different places, like on your drive, in a document, on your phone, in Voices app. I want you to create a process to capture and do not trust your memory. It's really important that after that, you actually review what's captured and schedule time to look back at that captured insights and turn those into actionables into your task list or your project management system. Because sometimes thinking, we just need to think to make a decision. Great. Breakthrough. Wonderful. But sometimes you might have a breakthrough or insights on a strategy or a way in which you want to do something. And if that's not captured, I don't want you to lean on your memory alone, that inspiration, creativity, and clarity is going to be there again. So let me put this all together for you. Here's what doing thinking time actually looks like. So you're going to schedule it on your calendar. So choose your focus, a singular, powerful question, the feedback loop framework, or the look ahead exercise. Pick one. You're going to change your environment. You're going to get away from your desk, move your body a bit, and go outside. Number 3 is you're going to let your brain work. Don't force it. Don't have expectations. Let your mind wander. And the truth is, you may have a focused question or intention and something else comes up. And the beauty of capturing it is maybe that's just bonus inspiration, bonus clarity. Grab that. Don't judge it. Wherever your mind went, there's probably a reason for it. So then you're going to capture that and you're going to have your own simple system, whether it's voice memos, a notebook, not several notebooks, so you don't lose those insights. And then you're going to review and get it into your task or project management so you can take action on it. That's it. That's how you'll actually do thinking time in a way that moves your business forward. So let's bring this all together. This was a long episode, and I realized I had a lot to say about this topic. And I think that that's not just because of how much this comes up with my clients or how much I've seen the impact of strategic thinking, but this is a really challenging area for business owners. And because I know how incredibly important it is, I really wanted to do a deep dive. So strategic thinking isn't something you earn after everything else is done. It's not a luxury. It's the work of leading your business, and you have permission to prioritize it. But knowing to prioritize it isn't enough, because my guess is you already came to this episode more likely than not already knowing that. I want you to understand that your brain has real barriers working against you. Stress, physical depletion, mental clutter, your environment, not setting yourself up for success, having transition times. When those stack up, willpower alone will not get you there. So you have to set yourself up differently. I want you to break that catch-22 that we've been talking about. Start small and imperfect. Acknowledge when your body needs attention first. Clear the mental clutter, clear the emotional clutter with brain dumps. Schedule thinking time when you actually have energy to focus. Give yourself a runway to transition out of doing mode, execution mode, and into expansive strategic thinking mode. So that's my deep dive framework. That's how you move from knowing you should think strategically to actually doing it. I hope you enjoyed today's deep dive into strategic thinking. And I have loved having you listen to this episode of the Small Business Straight Talk podcast. And I sure hope you found it to be incredibly valuable. But I need to be straight with you. No change, no change. Without taking action, nothing will change for you or your business. So today, here is your Take Action Challenge. Simply end this episode, head straight over to amberdelagarza.com/look ahead and grab my free Look Ahead 1 year from now power sheet. This power sheet is going to ask you those key questions to get your brain to focus strategically, to identify where you want to go, and you can start solving for the gap between where you're at and where you want to be. It's super simple. Just download the power sheet, then schedule 30 minutes of thinking time on your calendar. And I want you to protect it like you would a client meeting. If you got sick or the kid got sick or the dog started throwing up, as you would a client meeting, you would reschedule it. So if life is lifing, reschedule it. If it's not, honor it as you would your clients. Before that 30 minutes, I want you to give yourself that runway that we were talking about so that you can transition. And I want you to have a plan for where you're going to be when you are doing the strategic thinking. Are you going to go for a walk and you're going to record yourself? Are you going to sit in the backyard? Are you going to get some sun? What is it that you need to really set this 30 minutes up for success? That's it. Just capture it. And you've done your first practice. You're building that muscle. And you may also get answers to questions you haven't ever even asked yourself before. So be sure to grab that freebie at amberdelagarza.com/look ahead. And if you've enjoyed today's episode, do not keep it a secret. Share it with a fellow business owner who you think would find it valuable. My passion, my goal is to really help small business owners. And I think this is one of those episodes. I think that if a business owner can learn to think strategically on a purpose in their business, they're now empowered to solve challenges and problems and experience their business differently. And I bet you want that for your friends. So please be sure to share it. And if you are new here, I just want to say welcome. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss another episode. So that's my Straight Talk for today. Until next time, have a productive week.